I thought of talking about the Indian Ocean trade, but not at the same period, which is more relevant to the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and until the 12th century in the Indian Ocean. So let me see whether, yeah. So the first question one may ask is, why is it important to study the iconography of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara? And if you read Saddharma Pundarika, one of the most important Mahayana texts, it says very clearly, Avalokiteśvara, he was the protector of sailors and traders. So if I quote from Saddharma Pundarika, even if a cyclone were to blow the ship of one of those toward the island of Raksha demons, they would all become free from the danger of those Raksha demons if there were even a single person among them who chanted the name of Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara. For this reason, he is called Avalokiteśvara. So as you know, the Lotus Sutra or the Saddharma Pundarika, Sutra of the White Lotus of the True Dharma, is one of the most influential and venerated Buddhist Mahayana sutras. This chapter is devoted to Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara, Lord who looks down, or in Chinese, Guanyin, regarder of cries of the world, describing him as a compensate Bodhisattva who hears the cries of the sentient beings and rescues those who call upon his name. So the expansion of the Tantric Buddhism, or esoteric or Vajrayana Buddhism, from India across South Asia and to Southeast Asia is also linked with the expansion of the maritime activities towards China. This is what I am trying to explain today. The primary preliminary results of the Avalokiteśvara survey project, launched by the following institutions, provided insight into the relationship between Buddhism and maritime trade in Sri Lanka. So this was launched by the Center for Buddhist Studies, UC Berkeley, with my colleague, Dr. Sanjot Mehendale, and our students, Kelly Powell, and National Center for Scientific Research, CNR, is at Economal Superior, with former student Aryan Sakse, and Department of Archaeology, Sri Lanka, with former Director General of Archaeology, Senrat Disanayaka and Kalpa Sangha, and University of Rajarata, Sri Lanka, with Dr. Nwana Bewardena. This project is a part of a larger project which was launched by Lou Lancaster. So he has covered mainly China, Japan, and Southeast Asia, and we were covering Sri Lanka and southern part of India. So before I come to the real role of Avalokiteśvara as the protector of mariners, let me say a few words about the origin and diffusion of Avalokiteśvara. I personally believe his cult started in Gandhara. So let's go to Gandhara. At the beginning, or in the text like Lalita Vistara, which is one of the most used text, Sanskrit text, when depicting the life story of the Buddha in Gandhara, the Bodhisattva who was in the Tusita heaven decides to come to the earth. At that moment, had these Devaputras of Tusita wet. Embracing the feet of the Bodhisattva, they implored him, quote, "Noble being, if you leave this Tusita realm, will lose its glory," quotation ends. In response, the Bodhisattva replied, "Bodhisattva Maitreya will teach you the Dharma." He placed the diadem of his own head upon the head of Bodhisattva Maitreya and said, quote, "Noble being, after me, you will become the perfect and completely enlightened Buddha." So this is from Lalita Vistara. If you look at this sculpture, which is from Gandhara, you have on your left-hand side the Mahaparinirvana or Mahaparinibbana, passing away of the Buddha. On our right-hand side, you can see Maitreya holding a kundika or the water pot, residing in the Tusita heaven. But when you look at mainly the Pali texts, for example, they talk about 7 Buddhas of the past. So the earliest strata of Pali Buddhist texts, especially in the first 4 Nikayas, only the following 7 Buddhas, called 7 Buddhas of antiquity or Sapta Tathagata, are explicitly mentioned and named. So we have Vipassi, Sikhi, Vesabhu, Kakusanda, Konagama, Kashyapa, and Gautama. So, Chakravarti Siyanada Sutta from Digha Nikaya also mentions that following the 7 Buddhas of antiquity, the Buddha named Maitreya is predicted to arise in the world. So, if you take the long list of Buddhas of the past, the last ones are once again, so I have given the Pali name. I mean, this is from, of course, from the Buswell and Lopez book. We have given the Pali name, Sanskrit, his caste, birthplace, parents, and the Bodhi tree. So we have the same list. So as you can see, number 20 is Gautama or Gautama Buddha or Sakyamuni, and then Mettaya or Maitreya, who is from the Brahmin caste, who will be the next Buddha. I am showing you this, this sculpture which I published recently last year, which is now exhibited in the museum in Berkeley, Gandhari Museum. It gives us an idea about what I said very briefly. So on the top of it, we have Bodhisattva Siddhartha standing frontly, making Abhay Mudra with his right hand and left kept in akimbo on the waist. And then when you come to the second, the evolution from the Bodhisattvahood to Buddhahood of Siddhartha is confirmed by the Buddha in the middle register displaying the Dharmachakra Mudra. And then we come to the plant of the sculpture, which visualizes the transition from Buddha Gautama to the Bodhisattva Maitreya by the depiction of Maitreya about to take the role after the Buddha Gautama, who himself appears after the 6 Buddhas of the past who preceded him. So this is a close-up of the base. So between the 2 women, 7 Buddhas plus last in line, the Bodhisattva Maitreya, regarded as the future Buddha in the Buddhist eschatology, stand frontly at the far end of the viewer's left. In all, this sculpture visualizes the evolution from Bodhisattvahood to Buddhahood of Siddhartha and the transition from Buddha Gautama to Bodhisattva Maitreya. So in all these, you don't see Avalokiteshvara as the Buddha, as the future Buddha or the Bodhisattva to be after Maitreya. So we recognize Maitreya quite, easily because he is from the Brahmin caste. Normally he is dressed like an ascetic. So he holds the kundika, the water pot. So where is Avalokiteshvara in this story? Gregory Chopin and Gerard Fussman have argued that there is no epigraphic or textual evidence for the existence of the cult of Amitabha or Avalokiteshvara during the Kushana period. So they argued it didn't appear until the 5th century. Rosenfield, as early as 1967, prior to them, demonstrated that the Muhammad Nari type sculpture, which is illustrated here, may evoke symbols of the eminence and power of the Buddhist pantheon. He further argued that the Muhammad Nari type sculptures may evoke the genuine Mahayana concept of the simultaneous existence of a vast pantheon of savior deities rather than episodes from the specific text as Amitayus or Sukhavati Vihosutta. But in recent years, many scholars have worked on this, and especially I will come to what Richard Solomon said, and also Paul Harrison, and also Ree, who says the Ree explores the visual evidence for the Mahayana in Gandhara, and also Stefan Baum, one of Richard Solomon's students who is working very hard on the Gandhari Manuscript, we'll talk about the Bodhisattva Bhumi and the Buddha Bhumi, which are mentioned in Gandhari text. The most remarkable information or the hypotheses put forward by Richard Solomon with his former student Mark Allen. So at the end of the article, which was written in 2010, they conclude, so I read, in conclusion, although the discovery of Gandhari versions of several Mahayana texts among the new manuscript finds from Gandhara in some ways only makes an already complex picture even more complex, it nevertheless provides us with new material and concrete evidence for the presence of the Mahayana in Gandhara, and by implication elsewhere in India at early period. So this is the finding of most of the Mahayana sutras. I mean, if you have questions, I'll be very happy to answer. What we call the Gandhari Manuscript, which were found in Afghanistan and also Gilgit, Bamiyan, and other places, studied by Paul Harrison, especially Richard Solomon, Mark Allen, Stefan Baum, Timothy Lenz, and others, and also the German school of Buddhologists like Harry Falk and Hartmann. So their work completely revolutionized our knowledge of Mahayanism in Gandhara, because these texts, even earlier than anything found in, today's India, or in the Gangetic Valley or elsewhere, they all came from Gandhara or Greater Gandhara. So these are, again, I am showing you two sculptures from Gandhara. One of the two Bodhisattvas flanking the central image of the Buddha is obviously Maitreya, because he is holding the Kundika or the water pot. On the contrary, the wreath that the other Bodhisattva holds in his left hand has been seen as an alternative to lotus flower, characteristic attribute of Avalokiteśvara in India and Chinese Buddhist art. So this is a quotation from Professor Miyagi, Akira Miyagi. For the first time, I was able to publish this, those days unpublished sculpture from Gandhara, first in 2012 and last year in my book, When West Met East, Gandhara Not Revisited, published by Manohar here. And this gives you the concrete evidence there was a cult of Avalokiteśvara in Gandhara. Why do I say so? The figure depicts Bodhisattva Padmapani Avalokiteśvara dressed in royal garb, holding fully bloomed lotus in the left hand. His divine nature is conveyed by the halo. There is a general agreement among the scholars to consider Bodhisattva images whose turban crest bears a small images of a seated meditating Buddha, presumably Amitabha, as Padmapani Avalokiteśvara. It is well known that Avalokiteśvara, destined to attain Buddhahood, was commonly regarded as the emanation and thus the spiritual son of Amitabha Buddha. So this cult existed as early as 3rd century in Gandhara, and also the textual evidence, according to the carbon-14 analysis done on the manuscript by our colleagues, they can be dated very, safely to the 2nd century. So the Avalokiteśvara cult is not 5th century. It started around the 2nd and the 3rd century CE in Gandhara, and also it went up to Mathura and other places. And then it continued. For example, this sculpture also, which I published, which can be dated to the 5th or the 6th or the 7th century. It depicts Padmapani Avalokiteśvara seated frontally, holding with his left hand a stem of a lotus, blossoming a little above the shoulder. The presence of the seated Tathagata Amitabha in Dhani Mudra in the turban further confirms that we are certainly dealing with Padmapani Avalokiteśvara. Of course, I am not going to talk today, but you can see the continuity in Nepal and Tibet and Kashmir of the veneration of Avalokiteśvara from this moment onwards, going up to 7th, 8th, and 9th centuries, even after. What is important is for us, for this, what I'm going to talk today, is the origin and diffusion of Avalokiteśvara cult in Maharashtra. I'm not going to talk about all the depictions because there are so many. So if you go to Ellora, which is considered as an epitome of Indian rock art architecture, you have Avalokiteśvara holding the Padma or the lotus flower, and then the Amitabha in the headdress, in the jata, and with Tara, and also other depictions of Mahayana Bodhisattvas like Manjushri and Vajrapani. And also, this is also from Ellora, where you can see very clearly in the jata, the Amitabha Buddha and the lotus, and here you have Avalokiteśvara on either side with Tara images. And this is what Priya Brancaccio also, and also other Indian colleagues pointed out. Avalokiteśvara, if you just cover the Tathagata Amitabha here, he looks almost like a Shiva image that you find in Elephanta and also in Ellora in the Hindu caves. and also because of the Ajna. I'll come to that. And then, of course, I mean, I'm not going to show you all the cave temples. If you go to Nasik, Panduleni, there you have also same depiction of Avalokiteshvara with the Amitabha and also the lotus flower held with the stem. The Canary, a group of rock cut monuments located at the west outskirts of Mumbai. These caves date from the 1st century BC to the 10th century CE. 109 caves have been carved from the basalt. The large number of viharas demonstrates the well-organized establishment of Buddhist monks. This establishment was also connected with many trade centers such as ports of Sopora, Kalyan, Nasik, Paitan, and Ujjain. So if you, go through most of the caves in Kaneri, like in Ellora, like in Nasik or Aurangabad, most of the caves are used as Buddhist viharas meant for living, studying, and meditating. The larger caves or chaityas or stupas or halls for congregational worship are lined with intricately carved Buddhist sculptures, reliefs, and pillars, and contain rock-cut stupas for congregational worship. You may or you may not know about the importance of this cave, cave number 41, where you have several depictions of Avalokiteshvara here, and also the Ashtamahabhaya Avalokiteshvara. This sculpture that I'm drawing your attention was published by Gokule. So here we have Avalokiteshvara Ekadashamukha, that means 11-headed Avalokiteshvara, which became very popular later in Nepal, Tibet, and along the Silk Road. So here we have Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, who embodies compassion, sees and reaches out in all directions to assist those in need. So that's why instead of one, he had 11 heads, and later he had 1,000 arms with 1,000 eyes. So if you look at the Silk Road, which had a great impact of Indian art, I'll take you just to, few places like Mogao Cave Complex in Dongong. And if you go to cave number 35, which is belong to the 5 dynasties, that means the 10th century. Here you can see Avalokiteshvara with these 11 heads. And also cave number 76, this is north wall of the Song dynasty, 10th to the 13th century, again same. And you can see his hands, they all have an eye. So this is to look upon the world. So he had, like here, 1,000 arms, right? So it shows how this iconography developed. And we are in Mogao cave number 3, 13th and 14th century. And if you go to Yulin Caves, which is, of course, it's a Buddhist complex in Gansu province in China. And these are some of the depictions. I'm not going to show you all of them, but just to give you the idea about the spread of Ekadashamukha Avalokiteshvara along the Silk Road. So this is one. And this one is extremely important. It's very clearly, it has the 11 heads and also 1,000 arms, with the eye on the palm of each hand. So, of course, you can talk forever about this iconography, the impact it had, starting from Kaneri, going to Mogao Caves, and then to Korea and to China. China, of course, in Mogao, and also to Japan. So I come back to Maharashtra again. Which I talked last time when I gave the talk for the Asiatic Society. The development of the cult of Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, whose reputation of offering protection to traders taking the perilous land routes, gained much popularity in Buddhist cave sculptures. The presence of many depictions of the so-called Ashtamahabhaya, that means 8 great perils, Avalokiteshvara in Maharashtra's cave complexes in Western India clearly demonstrates that traders taking the dangerous land routes needed the Bodhisattva's protection against enraged animals, poisonous reptiles, wild beasts, evil spirits, captivity and slavery, the sword of the enemy, and devouring fire. The reason for this is that there are only two places in India that you find Ashtamahabhaya. One is in Maharashtra and one depiction in Orissa. I will come to that. So the reason is that most of the traders, I have insisted upon that when I spoke last Friday, most of the Buddhist establishment were inland along the rivers. But here, all the main rivers like Godavari and Bhima, which is a tributary of Krishna, they all go to the east side. They don't fall on the west side. So the traders were obliged to take the land routes. And when you take the land routes, you have to encounter many perils. The perils that I discovered, I mentioned, and also the ones that I am going to show you in a moment. So in this case, the Narnigan Pass is very important. It is even used today, and it was used even during the Satavahana period. From 200, third century, second century rather BC to the second century CE, and this was used as a trade route between Kalyan and Junar. So as I told last time, I took these photographs about 5 years ago, and still the people use this one. Because the fluvial navigation was not active in Maharashtra as it was in Gandhara or Middle Gangetic Valley or Krishna Valley or in Andhra Pradesh. So why there are so many depictions of Ashtamahabhaya in Maharashtra? The fear of the unknown gave birth to the legends of ferocious yakshas, rakshas, and pretas. The sculptures depicting the Ashtamahabhaya Avalokiteśvara evoke the dangerous land routes and the constant fear of shipwrecks. Buddhist visual narrative sponsored by traded owners can thus be seen as appeals for the protection from the blessed ones, in this case, of course, Avalokiteśvara, to reach their homes safely, and represent an often overlooked but essential part of the study of maritime trade. So I take you to Aurangabad caves to see the most beautiful one. There are so many, but this one is the one that I like most. So the presence of many depictions of the so-called Ashtamahabhaya, the 8 gate perils, Avalokiteśvara, in Maharashtra's cave complexes in Western India clearly demonstrate that the traders taking the dangerous land routes needed the Bodhisattva's protection. So what they needed was the protection from the enraged animals. As you know, in India, there are lions, and they were taking the land routes, and you have to cross the jungles, and there you encounter the wild animals. So if you are surrounded by evil animals whose teeth and claws are fearfully sharp, if you contemplate the power of Avalokiteśvara, they will run away swiftly. So this is one danger that the traders encountered. And then we have poisonous reptiles. So they could be lizards, snakes, vipers, scorpions. And again, if you pronounce the name, if you just utter the name of Avalokiteśvara, he will come. This is Avalokiteśvara with the lotus in his hand and Abhaya Mudra, saving the two traders who are frightened by 2 cobras behind 2 nagas. And then the wild beasts. So if you're surrounded by evil animals, so in the jungle, you have elephants, wild elephant, and again, you pronounce the name of Avalokiteśvara, and you will be saved by from them. And also one thing we need to take into consideration, of course, I'm sure all of you know in India, when in Asian countries, the fear of evil spirits and demons, people still believe. And if you are in the thick jungle where you hear all kinds of sounds and the darkness, the fear of the evil spirit is there. So here you can see the 2 traders, she is holding a child, attacked by an evil spirit. So if you meet evil rakshas, poisonous dragons or demons, if you contemplate the power of Avalokiteśvara, they will not dare to hurt you. So this is another fear. And also there is one shipwreck out of 8, one is ship, because all these traders took the ships to come to the seaports of Maharashtra and also in Gujarat, and then they went along the land routes. So even if a cyclone, which I started, blow your ship, if you pronounce the name of Avalokiteśvara, he will come and save you. Here you can see 2 traders in Anjali Mudra praying to Avalokiteśvara. And then the captivity and slavery. If you have your goods and if you have your money, if you walk in the jungle, in the past and even today, you will be attacked. So if anyone, whether guilty or innocent, is bound with fetters or chain, such bonds will be broken into pieces, and those who have been bound will become free by chanting the name of Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara. And then the sword of the enemy, you will be attacked. If anyone who is about to be beaten chants the name of Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara, the sticks and swords will immediately be broken into pieces and he will be delivered. And then, of course, when you go in the jungle, you encounter fire. And if thunder resounds, you get frightened. Lightning flashes, you get frightened. Hail falls and great rain pours out of the clouds. If you contemplate the power of Avalokiteśvara, they will disappear immediately. So this gives you a wonderful idea of the fears of the traders, not taking the fluvial or the rivers for their as networks, because in the rivers you don't encounter these things and it is cheaper to go take the rivers. But Maharashtra was very important in ancient trade because of the connections with the Western world, I mean from Africa and other places. So these traders took the land routes and they encountered these difficulties. It is the same if you look at the land Silk Road, I mean, starting from the Roman Empire, going up to Xi'an and beyond, even to Beijing. If you trace that, I mean, again, I am taken you to Mogao caves of the late Tang dynasty. And here is a wonderful depiction of Avalokiteśvara and all the perils that the traders could encounter, right? So I'll show you a few of them. One is the enraged animals. Of course, here you don't encounter really the lions, but the snow leopards, and also the captivity and slavery. You can see a person who is beaten, and then evil spirits. You can see the evil spirits here, and here is Avalokiteśvara, and he's crying, and you will get. I mean, you will be delivered from that fear, and of course, the devouring fire, a trading. I mean, surrounded by flames, and then Avalokiteśvara will come and save him, and also cyclones and shipwrecks. So it shows how something which started in India, in Maharashtra, became so popular because most of these traders were taking the land routes. So this gives you a very clear picture of the trade of the Indian Ocean connected with the land routes in Maharashtra area. As I told you, the only place where in India, to my knowledge, the Ashrama bear is found is in Odisha. This is in the Ratnagiri Museum, where you can see Tara as the protector of these evil, I mean the animals and the evil spirits and all that. You can see also the shipwreck here. So the choice of Jataka and Avadana stories depicted in paintings and reliefs of Ajanta, Ellora, Borobudur, and also Pagan in Myanmar, and many other Buddhist complexes reflects the aspirations of donors who sponsored them. The stories connected with the fear of sea monsters and terrestrial demons. I mean, here, of course, we are talking about Yakshas, Rakshas, and Pretas, were the major threats and enemies of mariners who return into perilous ocean and dangerous foreign lands in search of wealth. Last time I showed this, but I'm going to describe it. If you go to Ajanta cave number 17, where there's a fabulous depiction of the Sinhala, and known as Valasa Jataka, Dharmalapcha Jataka, and Sinhala Avadana in Divya Avadana. And what is there is the story narrated in Jatakamala and also other stories, where the danger that the mariners may encounter. So you have the shipwrecked mariners, and they are coming to the island. So again, you can, I mean, we can talk about many stories of this type, where the problems or dangers encountered by the traders and mariners are depicted in the Buddhist shrines, because they made them asking the help of the Bodhisattva to protect them. So the fluctuation of trade routes to Southeast Asia and China, this is very important. As you know, in the Indian Ocean, first trade routes were here, connecting India, Sri Lanka, and then of course, then we have the connection with Roman world, which I'm not going to talk today. and also Persia and Bactria and Indus Valley. And by the 7th century, the trade fluctuated towards India. From India to Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka to Southeast Asia and China. So this is what we are really aiming now. So I am going to read a long story now, which is very important. This is the story of Vajrabodhi and the expansion of Mahayana cults from South Asia to Southeast Asia. This story is very important to understand what I am going to talk now. According to the biography of the great tank court monk Vajrabodhi, written in his late disciple Lucien, probably compiled within 2 decades of Vajrabodhi's death, Vajrabodhi was originally the 3rd son of Ishanavarman in central India. Having become a monk at Narnigan Monastery at the age of 10, and having studied the treatise of Dhammakirti, one of the greatest teachers of Mahayana, at the age of 15, and having received full ordination at the Nalanda monastery at the age of 20, Vajrabodhi was instructed by Avalokiteśvara, who appeared in person in front of him in these words, quotation, "Your studies have now been completed. Go to Simhala, meaning Sri Lanka, to pay homage to the Buddha's tooth and climb the Mount Lanka to worship the Buddha's footprint," referring to Adam's Peak or Sripada. "Upon your return, go to the Middle Kingdom and pay your respects to the Bodhisattva Manjusri. The country has a karmic connection with you. You should go to spread the teaching and save the beings, all beings." End of quotation. This was the literally recommended by Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara. Following his advice, he went to Sri Lanka and stayed in Abheraja Monastery, which is the Abhegiri Vihara built in the 1st century BC, which was the seat of Mahayana, and made obeisance to the Buddha's tooth, which was in Anuradhapura at that time, and climbed the Mount Lanka, Sripada, or the Adam's Peak, to venerate the Buddha's footprint. 1 year after his arrival in Sri Lanka, Vajrabodhi returned to the kingdom in South India. 1 month passed. He reveals to the king of his intention to visit the land of China to pay his respects to Manjusri and spread the Buddhist Dhamma. In spite of the warning of the South Indian king who discouraged him, who insisted upon the dangers of the route to the Tang kingdom, Vajrabodhi decided to go to China as he was instructed by Avalokiteśvara. Vajrabodhi, facing east, paid homages to Manjusri and from afar, and paid homage to Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara in the west. Then, having bidden farewell to the multitudes, he boarded the ship and they took the sea. Catching a favorable wind, they crossed the sea in the day and night and arrived in the port of Bozili, which should be here in the Berwala, Bozili in Sri Lanka. They encountered 35 Persian vessels which were trading in precious stones in that country. As you know, Sri Lanka is very famous for their precious stones, especially sapphires, rubies, and many other, topaz and all that. So these Persian ships were there. They were in search of, they were doing the trade. You know, they were coming Persia and they were collecting the stones from Sri Lanka and they were going towards China. After a month, they reached the kingdom of Vijaya. So actually, they encountered 5 Persian vessels and he got into one of them. After a month, they reached the kingdom of Vijaya, which is Sri Vijaya in Malay. Hampered by foul winds, they stayed there for 5 months. It was only after the winds had settled that they were able to set out. When they were within 20 days from Tang territory, they all of a sudden encountered foul winds, which suddenly gave rise to fog while they were in the middle of the ocean. In the darkness, poisonous sea serpents, whales, and their ilk appeared and disappeared. Their heads intervened. The 30-odd merchant vessels drifted with the waves, and it is not known what became of them. Only the single ship carrying Vajrabodhi was able to escape this disaster because he recited the Mahapratihara Sastradharani. It is estimated that they covered more than 100,000 li by sea, chasing by the waves and drifting with the swell. For after 3 years, they passed through the foreign lands, experiencing various hardship, and only then did they manage to reach the imperial borders of the Great Tang dynasty. The reason why I narrated these stories is extremely important to understand the Indian Ocean trade at this period, because Vajrabodhi, this interesting episode, which took place in the 8th century, reveals much about the seafaring in the Indian Ocean, the spread of Buddhism throughout throughout, and the goods exchanged in trade. Uncovering and identifying traces of Vajrayana Buddhism is one of many ways to study trade in Indian Ocean. I don't deny, I should be very clear here, I don't deny the importance of coins, importance of ceramics, amphorae, seals and sealings, and all the other archaeological artifacts to study the trade. I mean, of course, which I have discussed elsewhere, and my colleagues have done this to verify. But here, what I am trying to do is that something that people haven't not done, to study the Vajrayana Buddhism and its diffusion, to learn more about the trade routes. From the 7th century onwards, Chinese, Arab, Persian, South Indian merchants developed networks of trade with Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. It was with the sudden burst of trade activity between China and the Middle East in the 8th century that Sri Lanka began to play a decisive role in maritime trade across a wide expanse of Indian Ocean. It was during the peak of this movement that Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara and his consort Tara became popular as the protectors of sailors in whole of Asia. The starting point of our investigations on Avalokiteśvara, as I told you about our project, was the inscription containing 11 lines written in South Indian Grantha script, dated to the 7th or to the 8th century, chiseled on the rock surface at Tiriyaya, which is about 29 kilometers north of Trincomalee, referring to companies of merchants who endowed the Mahayana Buddhist shrine dedicated to Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara and his consort Tara. Of course, its inscription was read long time ago, but something very important happened in 1983. The exactitude of this reference to Avalokiteśvara was proven on the 6th of April, 1983, when the Department of Archaeology under City Soma undertook an excavation at the site. 31 statues of Buddha, 11 of Bodhisattvas, 3 of Tara, a casket stupa top, and 4 Dhyani Buddhas were found buried under the paving stone of a ruined meditation hall. So this is the Padhanagara, with the double platform, and also with the Abhisheka Mandapa next to it. Nobody paid attention to the Abhisheka Mandapa because these statues were used for Abhisheka. Just to give you an idea, I can't put all the sculptures, but I have put you some, the imported ones and also locally made ones, and also this is the stupa top. I'm just mentioning a few of them. The statue of Adibuddha Vajradhamma with an elaborately worked Jatamakuta, depicting the 5 Tathagatas, so that these are the Dhyani Buddhas, Akshobhya, Amitabha, Amoghasiddhi, Ratnasambhava, and Vairochana in the headdress. And dressed like a bodhisattva, holding a lotus in the left hand and opening the flower with the little finger on the right hand. So this is a very important sculpture, certainly imported from Bihar. And again another one, solid cast bronze image of the Buddha in Vajrasana, with making the Bhumi Sparsha Mudra, and it's Pala style. It's no doubt about it, and it has to come from Bihar again. And this one, the statue of Padmapani Avalokiteśvara seated in Lalitasana, displaying Vardha Mudra, appear to have been imports from northeast India. So that means to say there were locally made bronzes and also some bronzes which were imported from the Middle Gangetic River, Bihar, Nalanda, and other places. So by this time, if you read most of the work done by my colleagues, you get enough literary evidence and also iconographic evidence to demonstrate the contacts between Bihar and Sri Lanka. I'm talking about the 5th to the 10th century. of our era. So these are the Buddhist sites which were active, especially in Nalanda, during this period. The terracotta votive plaques, what we call satsa, found recently in Ashokarama monastic complex, are of great importance with this regard. And this is Ashokarama, which is a Mahayana monastery. The Buddha's Sakyamuni is depicted seated in Vajrasana, making Bhumisparsha Mudra, surrounded by miniature stupas. The extremely worn inscription is probably the Pratitya Buddhapada Gatha, which is often found as on similar Indian terracotta plaques. Its style and iconography, according to Kosong Nagman Lama, is close to the ones discovered around Bodh Gaya and Nalanda in Bihar. In the 8th century, many Buddhist monasteries in Anuradhapura practiced Vajrayana, of which Ashokarama and the nearby Vajrayana are just two examples. So the fact that the Tirya is located on the left bank of the Yarnoya, one of the main openings to the sea roads of the east, suggests that it may have accumulated donations from mariners and merchants who were frequent visitors to the Buddhist shrine. The fact that you find the bronze images made during the Pala dynasty and coming from Bihar, it shows that these traders may have come from the Middle Gangetic Valley. So using Geographic Information System, GIS, mapping software to uncover spatial and temporal patterns of the locations of Avalokiteshvara images, our survey showed that when the cult of Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, as the patron and protector of mariners, began to gain popularity in Sri Lanka from the 7th century onwards, his images were erected in sanctuaries built at the estuaries or bays, that means by the side of the sea, or facing the sea, or inland along the navigable rivers. So, of course, I can't talk about everything because there are hundreds and hundreds of them, but just believe me, all the navigable rivers, if you go, we used to take a boat and go upstream, and everywhere we find these Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara shrines. And then we found bronze statues and rock cut images and stone statues in the round. Most of the bronze statues were locally cast, but some were imported by traders and pious monks, not only from India, but also from Cambodia. We are going to see that. The important thing about Sri Lanka is that it's a small island, as you know. It has 114 to 120 rivers fall into the sea because of the central mountains here, which receive about 200, during 200 days of the year, rainfall from the monsoon coming from the northeast and from the southwest. And in a radial pattern, they go, and along the navigable rivers, the traders used to go inland. So if you go along the big rivers, you find these shrines. So here I'm showing you one map that we have made of the East Coast, this area. According to the database, which will be online quite soon, if you click on this dot, you will find all the images of the site, images, pictures of the sculptures, and also the GIS, we give the location, and also if there is a bibliography, the bibliography. So we have almost covered whole island, and so I'm quite comfortable to talk about about Avalokiteshvara and its impact on Sri Lanka. If you look at the depictions of Avalokiteshvara in Sri Lanka, we don't find those beautiful ashrama that you find in Maharashtra. I told you it's for simple reason that they were made by the traders taking the land route. And in Sri Lanka, the traders mainly took the sea and the fluvial, the rivers. There are two types. One is the yogi or the ascetic type. Other one is princely and visual type. People have argued that the ascetic type came from Tamil Nadu, but I think I have shown this. The inspiration came from Maharashtra. I'll come to that. So just to give you an idea, the princely or jeweled Avalokiteshvara images wear royal garments and highly sophisticated hara, keura, and kankana, nupura, and karanakundala. So they are royal figures with a lot of jewelry. And if you take the yogi one, Yogi Avalokiteśvara is essentially an ascetic figure that can be distinguished by the ajina, the hide of an animal such as antelope or tiger, tied around the waist to hold the dhoti. Plus, he is devoid of all ornaments. So you can see the apart from the upavita, his chest is bare, and here is the hide. And I'm showing you, I mean, these are the places, the triad depicting the Buddha in the middle, flanked by ascetic and priestly type images of Avalokiteshvara on either side, are attested in Buddha Pattuna and Modhu Mahapyara and Situl Power. I'll come to that. These images were misinterpreted. Please don't blame me if you read that literature. I mean, who would say this is the king and the queen of the country? No, this is Yogi Avalokiteshvara and the princely Avalokiteshvara. There's no doubt about that. I'll show it to you. So I think the inspiration didn't come from South India. It came rather from Maharashtra. And I'm taking you to Aurangabad cave number 2. You have the main shrine. And on either side, you have 2 depictions of Avalokiteshvara. The image that the viewers write is the ascetic type, while the one in the left is the priestly type. Both bodhisattvas stand on lotus pedestals and hold a lotus banner on which sits a small Dhyani Buddha. Right? Here we are. And also 2 small Nagaraja help the bodhisattvas by supporting the long and wavy lotus stem. So here is the Naga hood, and you can see here, and also and on the Jata, you can see the Amitabha Bodhisattva. What is interesting is the Yogi Avalokiteshvara mainly in Maharashtra. The ascetic Avalokiteshvara wears a simple dhoti, carries an antelope skin over his shoulder, and holds a loop, pasha, in his left hand. So here you can see the ajina very clearly, and you can see the Bodhisattva Amitabha, who is the spiritual teacher of Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, and importantly, you have the pasha, the bondage. If you just close this part and ask anybody, they would say this is Shiva. Because if you compare with the depictions of Shiva in elephant, it looks exactly like Shiva. The only difference why we call him Avalokiteshvara, because of the presence of Amitabha Bodhisattva. Why I say it came from Maharashtra, and this is of course from Ellora, and this was found in a niche of the Begiri Stupa. I will come to that in a moment, where you have a depiction of Buddha sitting in Bhadrasana with the ascetic type of Avalokiteshvara holding the Kundika and Avalokiteshvara priestly type on the other side. So this was found in Sri Lanka and it was imported from Maharashtra. So these are some of the places. I'm not going to show you hundreds of sites we have found, but the most evocative one, this is from the Modhu Mahapyara, where you have the image of the Buddha. We are not at all sure the 2 images were looking at the Buddha. I think they were on either side of the statue. This was, of course, redone by the archaeologists of that period, Senrat Panavitana, whom I admire. But this is how he saw it, but it should have been on either side. So here you have the yogi, and here you have the priestly type. And this is for Buddha Pattuna, right in the middle of the thick jungle, which was found in 1983 by our Japanese colleagues over there. And then, of course, later they were destroyed by treasure hunters, unfortunately. But you can see Buddha in the middle, and the ascetic type and the priestly type on either side. This is the argument which I use for this one also. They were on either side. And also these statues were found in this shrine, and there were these statues. I'm taking you to one of the biggest centers of Mahayana in Sri Lanka, which is called Budurwagala, which is in the southern part of the island, and Buddhist shrine in Sri Lanka, consisted of 7 statues belonging to Mahayana tradition, should be dated to the 9th or the 10th century. So in the middle, I mean, like in antiquity, all the statues were painted. There were no statues in the world, I mean, starting from the Roman world or India, they were all painted. So you can see the remaining plaster here, right? So some say it's Deepankara Buddha. I think it is Gautama Buddha right in the middle. You can see with the monk who is here, how tall it is. On our right-hand side, we have 3 bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas. One is Vajrapani. It's easy to identify because he has got the Vajra. And then on our left-hand side, it could be Manjushri, but it's very difficult because the painting is no more there, the sculpture is damaged. Either he's making the two mudras, which I come, or he's holding the sword, which is a symbol or the attribute of Manjushri, but this is the reason why I put the question mark. And if you go to the other side, we have Tara. It's very, very clear because she's holding the Kundika and she's a woman, as you can see. So this should be Tara. And on the left-hand side, it's difficult to identify what he's holding. It could be Sudana, considered as one of the admirers of Avalokiteśvara, and also sometimes as the son of Avalokiteśvara and Tara. Anyhow, I mean, that's again a question mark. But the well-preserved statue right in the middle is ascetic Avalokiteśvara. Why I say so? You can see in the Jata very clearly Amitabha, the spiritual teacher of, the principal Buddha in the Pure Land, and the spiritual teacher of Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara. And then here, you can see the animal hide, the Krishna Jina. So this is the ascetic type. Now, if you go to the other side, my predecessors identified him as Maitreya. I mean, he has no Kundika in the hand, but he is making two mudras, and I consider him as Avalokiteśvara, the princely type. So he's making two mudras. One is the Vitarka mudra, other one is the Katakasta, gesture of holding the lotus flower. So this is a quite important one. I mean, even to begin with the whole diffusion of Avalokiteśvara images in Sri Lanka. One is the Yogi ascetic type and the princely and the visible type. So I'll show you very quickly. I think if I can have another 15 minutes, I will be able to finish if you'll be patient. So I'm taking you to the East Coast, Kuchaveli, where we have done a lot of work. In 1970, this was emergency excavation. Before building a rest house there, they found these statues, and they are, locally made, but respecting the Amaravati style. And there is an inscription with these two parts. The inscription consists of 8 lines in Sanskrit written using an early Grantha alphabet. This text explains that the pious wish of the author, the person who donated this, is to gain merit by making the representation of stupa and become a Buddha in the future to free humanity from suffering. As you know, the biggest difference between Theravada and the Mahayana is behind Mahayanism, any human being can become a Buddha, or at least make a wish that he may be the Buddha. So this is purely in a Mahayana context. So we did an excavation with my colleagues in 2011. I'm not going to talk about the excavation, but from the carbon-14 analysis we did, the site goes back to the 1st century BCE and continued until the 10th century, which is the height of the Avalokiteśvara cult in South India, Sri Lanka, and Southeast Asia. During the prospections, there were many sites. This is one. They accidentally found a statue of, it looks almost like Shiva, but it's not Shiva, but it is Avalokiteśvara, the yogi type. You all may have heard about Trincomalee, which is the 5th largest natural harbor in the world. And one of the reasons why the Chola dynasty, when they occupied north of India, selected Polonnaruwa as their capital, because the trade was now fluctuating towards the east. The west was not that important. The Roman trade has collapsed. Now the Southeast Asia and China entered into the market, and the Trincomalee was a blessing because it's very big natural harbor, and there is a connection, 2 connections. One is from here, from Gokarna, and it goes close to Polonnaruwa, and there was a canal built in the 10th century to connect the capital city. So this is very important, and we did prospections, and my colleagues did. Along the river, there are many Avalokiteśvara shrines. In Polonnaruwa itself, these are few of Avalokiteśvara images, both types. And also, quite interestingly, about 3 years ago, while we were doing the prospections, I went with my colleagues and with Tanuja Amaratunga, who is the officer in charge of this region, and she kindly showed me this site and said, asked what I think. Looking at the heads, I said, these are all Avalokiteśvara images. Unfortunately, the Department of Archaeology did an excavation, and look what they found. They found 4 statues of, one of Buddha and 3 of Avalokiteśvara in the shrine. One is a yogi type of Avalokiteśvara. So, there are a lot to be found in Sri Lanka. And if you come down from Polonnaruwa to Seruvilla here, and again, there are many Avalokiteśvara images. And Lankapatuna, which is another branch of the Malwater River, which connected the seaport to the second capital of Sri Lanka. You may have seen, if you have been to the British Museum, the Tara image, which was taken by a British officer during the colonial period. It may have come from this area close to Trincomalee. And then if you go inland, for example, if you go to Madirigiriya, and around the stupa, of course, the stupa goes back to the 2nd century BC. The Vatatage, this structure was built somewhere in the 5th century. And these statues were kept in the 8th century by the mariners who came from Thailand, according to the inscriptional evidence. And if you go to down south, it's quite interesting. Down south, it had, I can't call it a capital, but it was Tisamarama was the most important capital or the city in ancient Sri Lanka. Accidentally, Ayurvedic doctor found in his land these 3 statues. One is, of course, this is very early, could be dated to the 4th century, of a statue of Buddha imported from Nagarjunakonda, of the same style, what we call the Amaravati style. And it was found with 2 statues of Avalokiteśvara, which were added later during the when Mahayana was popular in the country. And if you go around all the other places, this is from Yatala Museum, but these statues were found around the stupa, and there is a shrine. The history of the stupa goes back to the 2nd century, but the statue cannot be dated before the 8th. So in the terrace of the stupa, they built a shrine for Avalokiteśvara. And here in the Girihandu Ambalantota, there were many, along the river, there were many statues of Avalokiteśvara. Why it is important? It is connected with the Valave River. You can see here, this is here where I excavated long time ago in 2006 and 7, where we found furnaces, and also our British colleagues in Samanala, they found the iron smelting technology that worked with the monsoon winds. So the connection is here. So this is the fluvial or the river, and as you may know, and there is an inscription here, 2nd century, really, saying that the king of that period gave the right to the monks to take taxes from the ships going in the river. This is the river mouth, the Valave River. And here we found the most ancient shipwreck in the Indian Ocean so far found, for the whole Indian Ocean. It goes back to the carbon-14 dating. We took 3 samples and sent to 3 countries, different countries. One was examined in India, the second was examined in France, the third was examined in America, and we got the same dating. 2nd century BC, if not most comfortably, 1st century BC, then this is the oldest. And the shipwreck, the ship was carrying these glass ingots and also bars of, as you can see here, bars of copper. We did the analysis, and also iron. I'm not going to talk about the shipwreck. The important thing is that since the ship is found and there is a port there, it's a natural port, not a dugout port, and it is connected with the sites. And if you go further south and you find Kusharajagala, where again you have the 5 Tathagatas on the headrest, you can see only 4th, 5th one you can see because it's out of the, carved out of the rock, and which is connected with Veligama, a natural bay. And also, if you go towards the north now, Jambukola Pattuna is very important because according to the Mahavamsa, the Sri Lankan Chronicle, Ashoka's daughter Sangamita bought a sapling of the Bodhi tree in Buddhgaya to Sri Lanka. The ship came here, and from there they took the land route, and they stopped, I mean, one day here in Tantirimale. So this was an old land route used by the traders. And in this site, there are so many unfinished Avalokiteśvara images. Now, this, of course, with a huge Pallava influence, which could be dated to the 7th century. And these are all 7th or 8th century, built by the traders who could not finish because they may not have had enough funds. Anuradhapura was the capital of Sri Lanka from the 5th century BC to the 10th century CE. And it is connected with this river going up to Mannar, one of the most important seaports of the island, and also of whole of South Asia. This is aerial photograph. And here, of course, the most beautiful statue of Avalokiteśvara found in Veragala, not in an archaeological context. It was hidden between two rocks, and there were many others. And we were fortunate to find it before it got destroyed. And I am taking you to the most recent excavations done by Professor Kulatuga, Central Cultural Fund in 2012. Here is an aerial photograph of the Theravada, I mean seat of Theravada called Mahavihara. This is the stupa built in the 2nd century BC, and this is the first stupa in Sri Lanka, 3rd century BC. Of course, they were all rebuilt after. While they were doing excavations here in this place, they found, like in Tiriyaya, 53 statues of Buddha, and also Avalokiteśvara, and also a statue of Tara. And close to that, there was Abhisheka Mandapa. Again, this is a place where Vajrayana Buddhism was practiced, and it shows that although we call Mahavihara was Theravada, by the 8th and the 9th century, even the Mahavihara became Mahayana in Sri Lanka. The seat of Mahavihara, or the siege of the Mahayana, was Abhigiriya, of course, starting from Nagarjuna, and also other monks who came, Dhammaruchikas. They were all here because they were chased from Mahavihara. And here, close to it, again, we have Abhisheka Mandapa, used for Abhisheka ceremonies, and which is a esoteric practice. And again, north of Abhigiri, if you go to Vijayarama complex, inside this stupa, they found 13 copper plaques with inscriptions on them. Sanskrit text written in Sinhala characters dated to the 8th and 9th centuries. First written document invoking Tara worship. So again, we are in a Mahayana complex. It is very clear. You can see the podium or a terrace-like construction which is in ruin. Now the Department of Archaeology is restoring it, and on one side you find these sculptures. According to Sadhanamala, Avalokiteśvara is an expert in distributing streams of nectar which flows from his right hand. Sushimukha, who stands below with a uplifted face with a big belly, in Pali Nepal, received the same. So here we have four-handed Avalokiteśvara, which is quite rare in Sri Lanka, with Tara on the side. So this should have been a center for esoteric Buddhism. In our project, the most important discovery was made by one of our students called Kelly Powell. It was found hidden here. I mean, the stupa goes back to 1st century, but in the 8th century, 4 niches were made, and the whole stupa was reconsecrated as Mahayana. So in this niche, they found a Vajra, the plug that I showed you imported from Maharashtra, an image of Tara, and this inscription. What is it? The stone inscription that Kelly Powell identified as representing the portion of a Sarva Tathagata Sattva Sangrahaya's Vajradhatu Mandala was discovered on November 10, 2010, when conservation work was being carried out on the southwest portion of the dome of the Abhigiri Stupa. It was found in a niche made expressly for the purpose of housing it, indicating the purposeful ritual placement of the object. The niche was found at an elevation of 125 feet, a depth of 3.6 meters, and 30 meters south of the West Ayaka towards the South Ayaka. So this is absolutely the final word to show the diffusion of Mahayanism and the esoteric and Vajrayana Buddhism, especially find the Sarvatathagata Sattva Sangrahaya, the Vajradhatu Mandala in Sri Lanka. This statue, I'm going to take about 5 minutes to talk about it. It's iconography study of Avalokiteśvara statue of Malwater. This is the Malwater River connected with Manta. It was found in the river, and the fisherman, it came to a net of the fisherman, allows us to say that it presents both characteristics of the two types of Avalokiteśvara found on the island, namely the yogi or ascetic type and the princely or bejeweled type. Avalokiteśvara stands on a base decorated with the upper row of upward lotuses and petals of row of reverse lotus petals. He performs Vitarka Mudra from the right hand and Katakahasta by the left. His body is characterized by slender limbs and clinging drapery and restrained ornaments. Despite his ascetic form, and he has restrained ornamentation limited to a long necklace composed of reeds, simple bracelets, and fingering. He wears neither earrings nor armbands. His long locks of hair fall over the shoulders. Long tresses of braided hair are drawn up and woven into the elaborate coiffure, in the middle of which a small effigy of Tathagata Amitabha is placed in the niche. And importantly, his simple dhoti carved with descending pleats is tied at the waist by multi-stranded girdle. A flayed tiger skin with pendant forelegs is worn over the dhoti. The important characteristic of the tiger skin is prominent display of the tiger face of the right thigh. And this shows the South Indian inspiration on this statue. The image is both ascetic and princely nature. Ascetic because of the tiger skin worn over the hip, the Jatamakuta with the loop cylindrical arrangement of dreadlocks, and absence of princely clothes and jewelry. Yet he is also princely because of his necklace, bracelets, fingering, festoon girdle, and the pearl bands adorning the base of the high-piled ascetic chignon. In this sense, the sculpture is unique in the world. So, where we can see the connection with South India, as Nandana Chotiwong showed, and also I'm taking you to the Jakarta National Museum, where you can see the tiger skin here and here, and it also shows the Shaivite influence or influence of Shaivite iconography on that of Mahayana Buddhism, and influence particularly perceptible in Indonesia. So this is from Indonesia, and this is from Sri Lanka. So this allows me to talk to you very briefly. The Indonesian position on the maritime trade routes favored the gradual introduction of the Mahayana cults from India to Sri Lanka. So this is the reason why I read the description of the Amogha Vajra and also at the beginning. So among the statues imported to Sri Lanka, the bronze camel statue here with the four-handed Lokeshwara. This was found in the southern tip of Sri Lanka, where there is again a natural port. And this was first published by Victor Gulbeff and then by Brice Vansong. And it's very important because it shows that it came from Cambodia. So I am not going to talk very largely on it, but very brief introduction about the expansion of Mahayanism in Cambodia. If you go to Khmer art, and also if you look at most of the catalogs and the experts who have worked on that, where you can see the images of Avalokiteśvara. This one is in the Metropolitan Museum, and this is in Museum. Both are from Cambodia. And if you go to Thailand, because of the Chayaphraya River, along the river, there were Bodhisattva images of the 8th century. Both are in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And then if you go to Irrawaddy River, that means Myanmar, which is 2,210 kilometers long. From Rangoon, you can go up to Mandalay and beyond. And also here, in Pagan or Bagan, where you have 3,000 monuments, and this is one of the oldest Bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara image found, dating to the 7th century, which is in the Metropolitan Museum. And if you go to Abedana Temple, which is of the 12th century in Pagan, in Myanmar, where you have wonderful paintings of Avalokiteśvara here. I'm not showing all of them, just one. So it shows the diffusion along the river of Mahayanism. And if you go to Java, Indonesia, and if you go to Prago River, and if you look at these temples like Borobudur and Chandimendu, Chandipavan and all, and you can see the Mahayana, huge Mahayana inspiration. I'm giving you just one example. There are so many. One is the Chandimendu, where it was built by the Shalendra dynasty in the 9th century, where you have Buddha here, and on our left-hand side, very clearly, there is a statue of Avalokiteśvara, and also outside also there are many statues. So it shows by the 8th century, 9th century, how Mahayanism was diffused. So the flayed tiger skin, which is face worn on a hip wrap, reveals the influence of Shivite iconography on that of Mahayana Buddhism, an influence particularly perceptible in Indonesia. Nandana Chotiwans correctly pointed out that Avalokiteśvara frequently has a tiger skin wrapped around the hip, a feature which was constantly come across in his representation from the Malay Peninsula and Indonesia. In her notice on the Avalokiteśvara image from Malwater River, Chotiwans correctly points out that this type of bronze images of Avalokiteśvara shows its extended influences to Peninsular Thailand and Indonesia during the 8th and the 10th century. So to conclude, I'm very sorry for taking so much time. The Indonesia's position on the maritime trade routes favored the gradual introduction of the Mahayana cults from India and Sri Lanka. The expansion of Tantric Buddhism from India across South Asia and to Southeast Asia is also linked with the expansion of maritime activities towards China. The visit of Vajrabodhi, first to Sri Lanka and then to China, was a result of the growth of the trading networks to the east. The maritime route that Persian ships took with Vajrabodhi on board was the same as frequented by Sinhalese bhikshunis, the Buddhist nuns, on their way to southern China. Chinese sources record during the period from the last years of the Jin to the end of the Tang, 11 Sinhalese embassies were sent to China. Just as the arrival of the Sinhalese nuns who spurred the development of female monasticism in China, Vajrabodhi and his disciple Amoghavajra, masters of historic Buddhism in the Tang capital, enjoyed the hospitality of the Tang emperor. I'm quoting from Sunderberg. The bronze statues of Avalokiteśvara found in Malwater River is not only unique in style and iconography, but it's also a valuable testimony to the religious exchanges between from India to Sri Lanka and to Southeast Asia. I thank you very much.